What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and today is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be going over the presentation that I gave at the USA Hockey 17s camp about a month ago.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the stress.
So welcome back. It's been a couple months since we put anything out, and that happens every summer because it gets unbelievably busy here. Usually I'll have clients from 7 in the morning until 8 at night, and I may get like an hour or two gap at some point during the day. So I don't have time to do the podcast. And when I do have time off, I like to spend it with my family because I don't get to see enough of them. So we usually take the summer off, but I had a big gap in my schedule today. Summer's starting to wind down a little bit. Some kids are taking off. We got, probably like 10 kids right now off at, like North American League main camps, some other kids getting ready for national camps and stuff like that. So I had a little bit of a gap, and I figured why not just hop on the mic and do an episode. I enjoy doing it, so here we are. All 100 of you listening. But what we're going to do today is going to be a little bit different. For those of you that don't know me, I do work with USA Hockey fairly often. I say fairly often. It's been a couple years. For about 3 years, I worked on the women's side. And this year, I was given the opportunity to work on the men's side, where I was chosen to be the head, or they call them leads, the head strength coach for the 17s development camp, and that was last month. So I was gone for about a week, working with the best 17-year-olds in the country, or 16-year-olds in the country, preparing them to get ready for the Holinka Cup camp and hopefully make that team. So Holinka Cup's like an international tournament that the 17s play at the end of the summer, some point in August. It might be late August. I always remember we'd be at the Women's National Festival when it was going on up in Placid. So that was always in August. So some point in August. But I was there with 4 other strength coaches, and we were tasked to put together a presentation that I had put together before we got up there. And then got up there, and the other coaches added some things here and there. And we came up with a presentation called Becoming College Ready. And because not everybody has access to get to this camp, I figured I'd go ahead and put it out here, like in a podcast episode and on YouTube, so that you can see how to become college ready. Now, if you're a hockey player, this is going to be very pertinent to you because that was the whole purpose of doing this presentation, was to give it to hockey players. However, if you're not a hockey player, in all honesty, there's a lot of good information just specifically for what we call general physical preparation, or getting yourself ready for the field of play. So I'm going to open that up, go through a couple things, and then we will dive right into it. So let me pull it up real quick. All right, so it was titled Becoming College Ready, and I'll go over the coaches that were there and kind of help give this presentation in a second here, but their names was obviously me. It was Joe Aratari, Taylor Corey, I think it's Corey, that's how you pronounce it, and then Jess Sayo. So we kind of came from all over the country. I'm from Florida. Jess was from California. Taylor he's from Massachusetts, and then Joe lives up in Rochester. All right, so first off, me. All right, I was the head of this camp here on the strength side. So just a little bit about me. If you don't know me that well, if this is your first time seeing an episode of this podcast, I'm the owner of Lions Den Sports Performance down in Wesley Chapel, Florida, just outside of Tampa. I was a strength and conditioning coach with the women's national team for about 3 years, 2017 into 2019, where we won the 2018 Olympics, the 2019 IIHF World Championships. We won 2 Four Nations Cup golds in 17 and 19. They don't do one in Olympic years, so we didn't have one that year. And they no longer actually do that tournament, so they don't do them in Olympic years, and they don't do them at all anymore. I'm a former NCAA hockey player. I played at Nichols College up in Massachusetts, just outside like Auburn, which is over by Worcester, which spelled Worcester. I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist and a performance enhancement specialist. A little bit redundant, but more letters after your name means people should take you more seriously, right? Then there was Joe Aratari. Joe is the director of staff at Next Level Strength and Conditioning. It's in Rochester. He's a strength and conditioning coach for the Rochester Nighthawks, the assistant strength and conditioning coach for the Rochester Junior Amherst. I think that's how you pronounce that. He's a strength coach for Fairport High School, the certified functional strength coach, and a functional movement screen certified coach. This dude, a great coach. Give him a follow on Twitter. He's always posting good stuff, or over on X, I guess you could call it. Next one, we had Taylor, and Taylor was actually chosen to be the quote-unquote intern of this camp, but he's anything but an intern. He's a very brilliant guy. I think the future is very good for him. He's currently working at Mike Boyle's Strength and Conditioning, and he is young and hungry, still wanting to learn everything he can and find a mentor. So, if anybody out there's looking for a really good strength and conditioning coach, and you're up in Massachusetts near Boston, give him a call. He's the former strength and conditioning coach assistant at Merrimack College. He's a former strength and conditioning coach at Manhattanville College, which is a small D3 school. He also played hockey there. He's a certified strength and conditioning specialist and a certified functional strength coach, level 2. And then last on the list, but not by any means lower than anybody else, Jess Sayo, very smart guy. He's a strength and conditioning coach for the Junior Sharks out in San Jose. He works with their youth development programs. He's a strength and conditioning coach as well at Menlo College. He's a former NSCA North California State Director, certified strength and conditioning specialist, and a certified FRC mobility specialist. So as you can see, if you go through all these coaches here, we all have multiple gigs. That's just because they pay so well in the strength and conditioning industry that we choose to work more than we have to. All right. So that was the staff. This is kind of the beginning of the presentation for the kids. So all the stuff that they're going to learn. Why increasing your base levels of strength is necessary for speed, and we'll go over that. When it's time to shift your focus towards speed and power in your training. Why maintaining your mobility matters as you get older and move on to the higher levels of play. How to make your conditioning reflect your needs on the ice. And we did a big part of this presentation is on that. And what it takes to train, recover, play, and perform at the highest levels. And it's often said that the guy who does the most work wins. It's really not true. It's the guy who does the most work and can recover from that work that wins every single time. This quote's really something that I heard from Buddy Morris 15 years ago, and it stuck with me, and it's been the basis of a lot of the things that I do within this industry. It doesn't matter how many times you can repeat an effort if the output isn't high enough to begin with. So what did Charlie mean by this? By the way, Charlie Francis was Ben Johnson's track and field and strength and conditioning coach. Brilliant dude. He's since passed, but I would say I model a lot of the things that I do are based on some of his teachings, essentially. But what this means is that it doesn't matter how many times you can fail to get to the ball, right? Or make the play or get back and back check and play defense. Doesn't matter how many times you can do that if you can't do it, right? So if I'm not strong enough or fast enough to get to that ball, it doesn't matter if I can not be strong enough or fast enough 100 times. It's my output isn't high enough to begin with. The conditioning isn't the issue. And I think we're starting to see a really big swing in the sports performance world where now we're understanding that conditioning 9 times out of 10 is not what the issue is when it comes to athletes on the field and ice and court failing to perform. And we'll go over some of that in a minute here. But this is a very important quote for me. I have it written on the wall. This is the basis of most of my coaching and programming comes from this very quote. All right, so training layout here. Whoops. Where are we? Okay. So training layout. This is the way that your training should look. If you're an athlete who has to put together their own training because you don't have access to a strength and conditioning coach, or you don't have the finances to get to one, or your school doesn't have one, this is really good advice on what your training each individual session should look like. So if you're putting together your own training, here's some tips on how you should kind of put it all together. This is a good rule of thumb here as far as reps go when you're looking for certain adaptations. Strength's going to be in the 1 to 5. Power 3 to 5 jumps are always like 3 to 5. Never go more than like 5, maybe 6 jumps, depending on like how light the impact is. For 3 to 5 accessory work, usually going to be in like 6 to 12, maybe 15 range. And work capacity is always like very high volume. So work capacity would be like, think of conditioning for your muscles, right? Not just your heart. That's always going to be very light loaded, high volume stuff. We're talking in the 100 plus reps range, not per set, but just in general. All right, so to start your training sessions, we warm up, right? Warm up's the first thing. So we go from general, which is like getting blood flow, to like the entire body, getting your heart going, getting a little bit of a sweat, getting moving around a little bit. Now this can be like, I hate it, but like hopping on a treadmill and going for like a 10-minute walk, or like getting on a bike, or, like your high knees, your butt kicks, your shuffles, your, jogging and backpedaling, things that just get you moving around. And after that general movement, we get into our dynamic flexibility. Now it's going to be like knee hugs, toe grabs, straight leg marches, stuff like that. Then we move on to static flexibility, right? And that's going to be stuff that's done in place and held for like 3 to 5 seconds at a time. So we're talking about the problem areas here, which are usually like the groin, the external rotators of the hip, hamstrings, and hip flexors. So we spend a little bit of time on the ground working on those things just to get direct blood flow to them and make them a little bit more elastic. Then we get to the movement prep. So movement prep is going to be movements like at a body weight or very lightly loaded that are going to prepare you for the work that you're going to do within the training session. Okay, so that's all in our warm-up. That's a lot of stuff. After the warm-up, we go into CNS prep. So CNS prep is going to be what creates like a sympathetic shift. So you're ready to go, and it tells your central nervous system like it's time to go. Now, there are like layers to this. We're talking about like jumps or like med ball stuff. And then, at the highest level, it's like depth drop jumps and lightly loaded Olympic lift variations and stuff like that. But here we have jumps, med ball throws, landmine, jammer, oldie lift variations, stuff like that. Things that are done fast with a light to non-existent load. All right, and then following our CNS prep, like now we're warmed up, we're nice and flexible and mobile. Our central nervous system's ready to go. Now we hit our main movement. Now it's the focus of our training session. Now that can be like a hex bar deadlift, or a deadlift variation of some kind, a squat variation of some kind, or like a bench press variation of some kind. Something that is a compound movement that is kind of the basis of our training. So like with the squat, that could be a main movement. It may be a squat or a box squat or a front squat, or like a camber bar squat or a safety bar squat or a goblet squat, a squat of some kind, right? A squat pattern. Bench press could be like a bench press, a fat bar press, an incline press, camber bar bench press, a dumbbell bench press, an incline dumbbell bench press. Like the possibilities are almost infinite here. And then with the deadlift, with most of my athletes, we stick with the hex bar deadlift, but we may do like a deficit version. We may do like pulling out of the pins or the straps coming from the floor. There's a lot of different variations that we can do there as well. All right, and then after our main movements, that's where we try to focus most of our energy. We're going to expend the greatest amount of energy during our session on that main movement. All right, so after your main movement, we'll get to the accessory work, and that's the stuff that's really designed to help bring up weaknesses, right? So if you're an athlete that has a pretty big shift when you're doing anything on 2 feet, we do single limb movements here. If you need work on your posture, we do a lot of pulling. If your bench sucks, maybe we do some tricep work. Low back movements, hamstrings, all that stuff. These are your possibly quote unquote like isolation movements, or like dumbbell work, stuff that's not quite as heavy as the main movement. Then we get into work capacity. It's in conditionings in quotes because it's not really conditioning. It is work capacity development. So we're talking about like sled pushing, like high volume, low intensity finisher stuff. That's where we're talking about like push-ups or like tricep extensions, inverted rows. If you're really strong, like pull-ups. Stuff that is done in high volume to help increase your overall work capacity or your capacity to do work. And then we finish with a cool down. Now, this can be like some soft tissue work, some mobility work, some stretching. There's a lot of different things that we can do, some breathing exercises, anything that's going to help kind of pull us down from where we were, that we got that huge sympathetic shift. We got to kind of shift back into a parasympathetic state, and those things can help do it. All right, so hopefully that was enough information for you to be able to put together your own training session. All right, next we're going to talk about strength. So strength is going to have a positive impact on every single other adaptation that we're looking for, up to and including flexibility. All right, so literally every single one. So if you look at speed, right? Speed is distance over time. The rate limiting factor of speed is how much force you can deliver into the ground and react off of. So if I'm stronger, I have the capacity to be faster. Power is work over time, and work is force times distance. So a stronger muscle is going to create more force. If I can create more force in a shorter time, then I can be more powerful and faster. Sorry, if I can have more force, what am I trying to say here? Force over a distance. So if I can be forceful in a relatively quick period of time, right, I'm going to be able to be more powerful. And that sounded ridiculous, so don't quote me on that. Flexibility and mobility. So it is my opinion that flexibility deficits are really strength deficits pretending to be mobility deficits. So if you're immobile, it's not because like your muscles are too tight. It is, but it's really because you're not strong enough at those end ranges of motion. Your body's not going to let you get into positions that it doesn't believe you can get out of. So if we are immobile at the end ranges, I'm not going to be able to achieve depth in a squat. So if I can get stronger, I am going to become more mobile. Conditioning work capacity. It turns out like mid-season, right? Let's say you're playing and your coach is like pissed because you seem ill-conditioned. You're getting beat to the puck and all this stuff. Well, chances are it's because you're weak, right? What happens during the season? Everybody scales back their training to a pretty high degree when it comes to the weight room. So you're more than likely not ill-conditioned. You are, but you're not as strong as you were. You can't get to that puck because you're not strong enough, not because you're not conditioning enough. You're on the ice 3, 4, 5 days a week between games and practices. You are plenty, quote unquote, conditioned. You're just no longer strong enough or fast enough to accomplish the task. So strength will help there. Injury prevention, like stronger tissue is going to be more resilient tissue. Strength allows you to accept and overcome more force. So it will absolutely lead to less soft tissue injuries. All right, so when it comes to strength, like you don't have to be a power lifter, but you need good base levels of strength. And these are the numbers that we consider to be like good to elite for most athletes. So we're talking about movements. We want to stick within the primal movement pattern. So we're talking about like squatting, hinging, lunging, pushing, pulling, rotating, and like gait, which would be like walking, but in the sports performance world, we consider that like sprinting. Within our bench press variation, a good to like elite number would be somewhere between like 1.25 and 1.5 times body weight, all right, for your average like 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old. Back squat or a variation of the back squat, we want to be 1.5 to 2 times body weight. Hex bar deadlift or a variation of this deadlift, 2 to 2.5 times body weight, like 2.5 times body weight. You're more than likely strong enough. Now you can really kind of shift that focus towards speed. Same thing with the squat. If you squat 2 times your body weight, what is like 2.2 times going to do for you? Now we need to focus towards speed, and we would probably actually make that transition prior to that. We wouldn't wait till we got all the way up to 2 times body weight. For when it comes to row variations, now this isn't like a base level of strength, but you need to make sure that you're kind of pulling in a horizontal fashion. So like a seated row, a single arm dumbbell row, a barbell row, 1.5 to 2 to 1. That needs to be your ratio of pulling to pushing. So 2 pulls for every 1 push. And pull-ups, it's my opinion that you need to be able to do at least 8 if you are a athlete. You should be able to do that. All right, next is power. I think of power as speed with some strength behind it. Like that's the easiest way to think about it. The best ways to increase power are going to be force transfers, right? So like med ball work, landmine work, jammer work, Olympic lift variations. That's how we get more power for. That's how we display power too in a lot of respects. Whereas like a sprint start can kind of show speed and how fast you are. Like a med ball throw from a 2-point stance is going to be more of a quote unquote powerful movement, if that makes sense. We can do depth drop jumps. I'm a huge proponent of depth drop jumps. I have athletes that work all the way up to like 5-6 foot boxes. because I think it's quite possibly one of the best movements you can do if your goal is to increase overall strength and speed. Take it to the bank. Dynamic effort work. I'll link some videos here that I've done before and some episodes here in the description talking about the dynamic effort work or dynamic effort method and how you can utilize it as an athlete. I also wrote a book about it. I'll link that in the description as well. Loaded jumps. So like relatively lightly loaded jumps out of a hex bar or dumbbells can really help increase power as well. And again, these are best done early in your sessions. Think of these like either the main movement or like a CNS prep type thing. You're not going to want to put these in after you've done like your heavy squat or your heavy deadlift or bench or whatever the case is. All right, next one's speed. All right, speed is one of the biggest ways to set yourself like apart from the rest of the pack. You know, there are a lot of factors that play into speed development, and just sprinting is not it. All right. When we talk about speed, what I want you to think about is not like sprint speed, but speed of movement, right? So being fast while we're moving. And I'll go into that a little bit further down. So how do we increase speed, right? Strength. If I can put more force in the ground, I have the capacity to be faster. If I'm more mobile, I can be lower in my hips longer. I can develop strength at lower kind of body positions. I'm going to be faster. Sorry. More power. Again, more power is going to mean more speed. And, you know, we have to practice and train for speed too. I can't just get stronger and expect myself to be faster. Otherwise, all the guys at Westside that are squatting over 1,000 pounds would jump 30 feet in the air, right? I still have to practice and train for speed. I cannot just get stronger. I cannot just get more mobile, and I cannot just get more powerful. All right? It doesn't work that way. The importance of speed endurance. So you need to not just be fast, but you need to be able to be fast over and over and over again. It's not just a one-time thing. So if I really want to be the best possible hockey player or even basketball, baseball, football, whatever it is, I have got to be the same speed, which is like a high speed, over and over and over and over again. Just doing it once isn't gonna do it for you. All right. And there's ways to accomplish that, and we'll go over that in another episode. And then being agile, right? That's part of being fast as well. And being agility is the ability to accelerate, decelerate, and then reaccelerate your center of mass of your hip. So it is not like fast feet. It is not foot speed. It is not agility ladders. It is being able to put force in the ground and displace your center of mass as fastly or as quickly as possible, or slow down and speed up. Agility is mostly a measure of power, not just speed, in my opinion, because if you're talking about changing directions going side to side, you're going to have to overcome upwards of like 3 to 4 times your body weight to get in and get out. If you're going to, like, let's say I'm running to the right and then I want to run back to the left, there's a lot of force to overcome there. If I'm on the ice and I'm skating to the right and I want to skate back to the left, you know, if you're somebody that can reach speeds of like 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour on the ice, you got to overcome that 25 miles an hour to be able to get out. It takes a lot of speed, and that takes a lot of power. A lot of strength and a lot of power. All right. Now we're going to hop into conditioning. All right. I did an entire video on this. I'll link this in the description, so we're not going to spend a ton of time here. But hockey's played 45 seconds at a time. That's what you're always told, but it's really not the case. Here at the NHL level, here are some average intensity levels of each shift on the ice, right? So with defensemen are kind of above that 45, right? They're going to be somewhere between 50 and 65 seconds. They don't have as much offensive zone responsibility. So if you're in the offensive zone for a long time, chances are defensemen are going to be A-okay, and they're not going to have to come off a shift. Centers are closer to that 32 to 40 because they have so much defensive zone responsibility. So they're actually in the under when it comes to that 45 seconds. And wings are closer to that 40 to 50 seconds, which puts them kind of like right in the middle of that 45-second all-out effort, but not so fast. So if you look at this slide here, the graphic that's on the right-hand side, 39% of that, possibly 32 seconds for a center is spent in a 2-foot glide. That means you're on 2 feet. You're not moving. You're not pushing your legs. You're quite literally just moving down the ice on your feet. The cruise slide was 16.2%. Medium skating intensity is about 10%. Struggle for a puck or position would be 9.5%. And you can go down and see that. But like way down at the bottom or near the bottom, we start to get into the high intensity with a puck, which is 0.4% of the time. And then high intensity skating would be 4.6% of the time. So for somebody who tells you like you need to condition 45 seconds at a time of all out effort, it is absolute nonsense. There's no data to support that. And if you are training in that respect or in that manner, you're going to struggle when it comes to like actually being conditioned and being a good hockey player. So here's like a pie chart of everything kind of broken down here. This is your like NHL level shift efforts, right? So at high intensity, we're talking about 18.4%. Now, that includes struggling for position or battling, high intensity skating with a puck and without a puck. That's about 8 total seconds, right, of that possible 45 seconds, 32 seconds to 65 seconds. So it's not all that much time at the highest possible levels. You quite literally cannot skate that hard for 45 seconds. Medium intensity is about 10.8, which would be 4.86 seconds. Low intensity would be almost 70%, at about 31 seconds of that, near 45 seconds. Backwards for forwards, you're skating about 2.2 seconds backwards, right? And backwards is more than likely, if you're a forward, it's more than likely a higher intensity because you got stuck covering for a D-man and you're trying to get back. All right, so the vast majority of this time is spent in low intensity or medium intensity. So to think that we need to skate as hard as we can or bike as hard as we can or sprint as hard as we can for 45 seconds is an absolute exercise in futility. Like conditioning continued here. So what is conditioning? It is the process of training or accustoming. I feel like it should say customizing. No, that can't be a word either. Accustoming a person or animal to behave in a certain way, right? So hockey is I'm kind of skipping right over that. Or to accept like certain circumstances, right? Which isn't actually the conditioning that we're talking about here. That would be more like kind of emotionally conditioning somebody or quote unquote like grooming them. You're trying to get your body to behave in a certain way. And believe it or not, like a lot of like the reasons why we can't be as conditioned as we would like to be without like a ton of effort is because our brain has like these stopgaps to keep us from operating at such high intensities that like we kill ourselves. You know what I mean? So we have to break through those slowly over time, which is why like it takes so long to really become like the best possible athlete that you can be. Just it is what it is. Hockey is anaerobic, but our conditioning should reflect the alactic demands as well, right? So anaerobic would be like lactic, the presence of like lactic acid. But there's also like alactic demands, and that's like your first like 1 to 8, 9, maybe 10 seconds. We need to spend time in that space too, because that's where we're operating at the vast majority of the time when we are skating at the highest possible intensity levels. All right, so how shouldn't we condition? 30 to 60 second bike sprints forever. Those are a waste of your time. They're not bad to like lay a foundation or a base, but that's not how we should be conditioning like middle of the season or even like near like the start of the season. That needs to be something that's done like very early in your off season to help lay that foundation. Mile runs are exercise in futility. It's the total wrong energy systems, in addition to all the other damage running can do. And bag skates. So coaches don't like to hear this, but bag skates are super contraindicated if you want to be good at hockey and win games. So how should we be conditioning? Weight training. Weight training is a great way to condition, not even just things like the dynamic effort method and doing those, like med ball work and like lower intensity Olympic lift variation, stuff like that. Weight training in general, your average concentric phase for like each lift that you're doing is going to be like less than 2 to 3 seconds, right? So that's us developing like not developing, that's probably not the right word. That is us working for 2 to 3 seconds, and a whole set is going to be closer to like, I don't know, depending on your volume, anywhere from like 5 to 30, even 45 seconds of that type of work. It is great for hockey conditioning, quote unquote conditioning. Sled work is great. I abuse the sled here at my gym. We use it all the time. It is quite possibly the best form of conditioning when it comes to sports, in my opinion, because it does allow us to handle a load. And it also, when we're pushing the sled, it puts us in a perfect 45-degree angle, which is what happens when we go to sprint. So you're learning to develop force and do it over and over and over again in a acceleration position. Huge win. Sprints, short sprints, or change of direction type of quote-unquote agility training can be great as well. And jumps with adequate rest and high output. It's going to teach you, again, to be like powerful, for a couple seconds at a time, which is exactly what you need for the sport of hockey. And if you're not a hockey player or coach or parent or whoever's listening to this, you can look at your sport and look at like how long you're being active at like the highest levels within a shift or a play or whatever, and you can customize your conditioning to that. You can make your conditioning look more like your sport. It doesn't have to be like gassers for football or poles for baseball or 110s for football, which is the dumbest thing. It doesn't have to be Herbies for hockey. It just needs to be something that's going to condition your body to be able to do the things that it needs to do on the field of play. All right, mobility's next. Your mobility is going to dictate a ton of your successes both on and off the ice or the court or the field. The more you train play, the more time you need to spend on your mobility work. So what is mobility? Mobility is the active range of motion of a joint, whereas flexibility would be like the passive range of motion when it comes to a muscle itself. So why is it important? More mobility in the sport of ice hockey for sure is going to mean more speed. If I can get lower in my hips, I can create better angles. I can put more force in the ground. I'm going to be faster. So if you're somebody who's like really locked up and can't get like into a good bottom of a squat position, you struggle to, I would bet money without touching a weight or doing a speed exercise, I could get you faster if we just got you more mobile, right? Which would include some strength stuff, but guaranteed. And how do we increase mobility? Again, increasing strength at the end ranges of motion. We do like isometric holds. They can be weighted or loaded. They can be unloaded. But in-range isometric holds, squatting to depth, doing upper body pushes and pulls through a full range of motion. That is the best way to become more mobile. And some band distracted stretches, right? So sometimes there are some structural issues that do make it harder to be mobile. And those band distracted stretches can kind of alleviate some of the tension and the adhesions within the joint capsule. So those are always, usable as well. All right, areas of importance. So for hockey specifically, and every sport, this is kind of a big one. The ankle, right? Sets a table for all movements. Mobile ankles help protect the knees, right? Your hips, groin, hip flexors, your anterior hip capsule, your internal and external rotators, and your hamstrings, your posterior hip capsule are going to be the most important parts of your hips. Your thoracic spine, you can do various rotations, creating more stability within the, like your scapular stabilizers are going to help increase that thoracic mobility. And then your shoulders. Again, strengthening the scapular stabilizers will also have a positive impact on your shoulder mobility. If I get locked up in my thoracic spine or my scapular, stabilizer type muscles, so you'd call it like your scapulothoracic joint, if you get locked up there, that's going to really have a huge effect on your shoulders. And you can strengthen your internal and external rotators as well. We talked about creating more mobility by creating in-range strength. You can do the same thing when it comes to internal and external rotation of the shoulder. All right, recovery, sleep, nutrition, active recovery strategies. So we spent a little bit of time on this at the camp. Because this seems to be like the one thing nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole is the recovery part, unless it's, sitting there, with the Normatec boots on or something where we don't have to be active or pay attention to anything. Recovery, especially sleep, is the performance enhancer that no one wants to touch. So sleep, how much, right? For 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old active athletes, we're looking at like 8 to 10 hours. You need a lot of sleep. You're doing a lot of damage. You're doing a lot of work. You have to make sure that you sleep enough to recover. If you aren't sleeping, you're not recovering. I saw when I was with USA Hockey, we had to sit through like a USADA presentation, and the guy did an entire like 3 hour thing on sleep, and it was amazing. The biggest take home for me was he said if you could bottle the benefits of sleep, like if you put it in a pill, bottle it up, and sell it, like the USOC would ban it. Right? That's just how positive sleep is. One of the things that we want to start trying to do is putting away the phones at night. That blue light is going to kind of inhibit your body's ability to shift into that like parasympathetic state and want to go to sleep. What are you eating and how much are you eating? That's a big topic here. I get kids that are like, I can't put on weight. Well, how much are you eating? I eat a ton. I have them say, hey, next 3 days, write down every single thing you put in your mouth. And bring it back in and we'll go over it. And like 99% of the time they walk in, when they hand it to me, they're like, man, I really don't eat that much. As these kids, because they think that they're eating like off menu or something that's not good for them, they think it's a lot of food. The reality is most of them are just, they've got all the signs and symptoms of somebody who's not eating nearly enough. And it turns out that they are not eating nearly enough when they're trying to put on weight. I don't run into as many kids in the athletic realm that need to take weight off, although I do have some, and that changes a little bit. But again, it's all about what are you eating and how much of it are you eating. That's how we gain and lose weight for most people. Calories in versus calories out, like matters. It does. Recovery strategy. So ice, no. NSAIDs, no. Those are both going to slow down the inflammatory response, which is going to slow down your recovery. And that's when we're talking about recovering from like training, not recovering from like a big injury where you might have to get some really out of control inflammation under control. Ice and NSAIDs are contraindicated for recovery from your training sessions, from your workouts, stuff like that. And I mean, a lot of respects they are for injuries as well. But it's, if you're in pain because you're injured, or there's a overblown inflammatory response to like spraining your ankle, and your ankle's like the size of a grapefruit, yes, we need to get that out of there. So in that case, I would say yes, like NSAIDs and ice are good. You can go for a walk. Cal Dietz did this. I cannot remember for the life of me where I read this, and I cannot find it anywhere, so it might have been in a dream. But they had half the kids after training sessions go for a 20-minute walk, and half of them use ice. And after 48 hours, they found that the kids who went for a walk had significantly better markers when it came to recovery. So take that for what it's worth. You can push and pull a sled. It's all concentric action. So what it's going to do is it's going to bring blood flow into the area, and it's going to push out all of the nastiness that your body created from training. So you need, so they say groceries in, right? So all the oxygen, nutrients, all the good stuff has to come in, and blood brings it in, and then all the bad stuff has to get pushed out, and that goes through your lymphatic system. And our lymphatic system runs just like our circulatory system, but it doesn't have a heart. It needs pressure changes to move everything through, and those pressure changes are created by muscle contractions. So if you can push or pull a sled, or even go for a walk, you're going to help shuttle some of that stuff out. And it's a good rule of thumb. You owe yourself 10 minutes of self-care for every hour of work that you perform. So if you were on the ice for an hour, you owe yourself 10 minutes. If you're in the gym for an hour, you owe yourself another 10 minutes. They don't have to be all at once, but at some point throughout the day, you need to work on your mobility, some soft tissue stuff, some stretching, some breathing exercises, something that's going to help you recover. You owe yourself 10 for every hour. Next, we added these in because we did warm-ups and cool-downs for all the guys, so we wanted to kind of go over why we were doing them. This is how you should structure your warm-ups. Foam roll has a question mark on it because should you foam roll? I don't know. If you have something, for me and my athletes, what I do is if they have something that's really tight and really kind of like locked up, we'll go ahead and let them foam roll. Otherwise, I think it kind of starts that parasympathetic shift, and we don't want that. We want to be in a sympathetic state. And it can also, if there's enough pain, it can cause them to guard, which would be, counterproductive to what they're trying to do in the moment. So I usually am not a fan of foam rolling before, but I do know some coaches who like it. And if you can, if you justify why you're doing it, you're never wrong. So if they have a good justification, go ahead and foam roll. Then we general warm up. We went over this earlier, right? That's moving around, getting some blood flow. Then our dynamic mobility into our static mobility. That's our problem areas like groin, hip flexor, internal, external rotators, hamstrings, stuff like that. Movement prep, which would be like squat and lunge variations. Could be from getting on the ice, like some lateral lunge variations or some drop step lunges. Things that are going to get more targeted blood flow to the areas that we want, and will kind of cue you to like extend through the hip in a specific way, or get good depth and drive at certain angles, stuff like that. And then CNS prep. So when we're getting on the ice, before we get on the ice, we do skips, bounds, and jumps. That just kind of tells our body, all right, it's ready to go. And then cool downs, right? So this is how you should kind of structure a cool down. What we're trying to do is create a parasympathetic shift. So that is our body's rest and digest mode. Sympathetic would be like fight or flight, and then parasympathetic is rest and digest. So after we get done playing, we are in fight or flight. We need to get into that rest and digest mode. And this is some ways that we can do it. Soft tissue work, like foam rolling, using a lacrosse ball, massage, those are all good ways to not only like help loosen up and break up some adhesions, but it actually can cue your body to get into that parasympathetic state. If you've ever had like a good massage, what happens afterwards? You feel like you want to go to sleep. That's because you've created that parasympathetic shift. Stretching can also do that same thing. So blood and lymphatic flow, you want to get the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. So a little bit of movement. We do like squat to stands, some static stretching like rocking frog stretches, all the problem areas. You can do deep breathing exercises, deep in through the nose, slow out through the mouth. That can help create that parasympathetic shift. And then again, like some static mobility stretching, stuff like that. It was Jimmy Radcliffe was real big on walking backwards as part of a cool down. I kind of use it sometimes. I get where his head's at. You're getting some blood flow to the areas that you want it to, and there's no eccentric movement really. So walking backwards is a good thing to add in, possibly. I don't know that there's any studies on it. All right, so this was the very end of it, and we asked for questions, and I think we had like 3, and they came from coaches. So where are we? There we are. All right, so that was the presentation that we did. That was 41 minutes and 15 seconds. Goodness gracious. If you made it all this way, thanks for kind of tuning in and sticking around. Hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll be able to do some more episodes if I have some gaps. I really want to talk about like preseason conditioning because I have a feeling that everybody's doing it wrong. But, hopefully the weeks open up where I can do that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. There's contact info on the podcast page as well as the YouTube page. Our website is www.theldsp as in Lions Den Sportsperformance.com. You can find me on there, on Instagram, Facebook. We're everywhere. You can follow my X account. We've been growing a little bit, so that's been fun. If you're interested, I know I talked about like speed earlier. I wrote a book that came out about 2 months ago called The Dynamic Effort Method for Athletes. And if you're watching, it's in mirror mode, so it's spelled backwards. But it's great information when it comes to things you can do within the gym that can help you kind of take your speed to the next level. It is reserved a little bit for athletes with like at least a moderate training age. But, tons of good information. It's an easy read. You'll get done with it in about an hour. It's how I bend Westside Barbell's dynamic effort method to use for my athletes. So I think that's going to do it. I'm going to have to get on the floor here in about 15 minutes. I got some kids coming in this afternoon. Hope you learned something. Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. Go buy a book, and we'll see you next time.
To hear you, 'cause you cannot master the strength.